I'm short, apologies. And for your continued service to our nation. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lacey Schley, Research Engineer and Partnership Strategist for the Oklahoma Aerospace and Defense Innovation Institute. It is my pleasure to introduce on stage our first panel of the afternoon, the Security Implications of Emerging Technologies panel. The moderator today will be Dr. Mark Raymond in place of Dr. Eric Heinze, who is unable to attend due to illness. We wish him well. Mark Raymond is the Wick, Cary Associate Professor of International Relations and the Director of the Cyber Governance and Policy Center here at the University of Oklahoma. He holds a Ph.D. in political science from the University of Toronto. His research and teaching interests include international relations theory, international law and organization, and international security. He is the author of Social Practices of Rulemaking in World Politics and is also the co-editor of Organized Chaos, Reimagining the Internet. Additionally, his work appears in various academic journals, which I had a hard time narrowing down, the Journal of Current Southeast Asian Affairs, the Journal of Global Security Studies, and the UC Davis Law Review, just to name a few of them. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Dr. Raymond.
Thank you to Lacey for the introduction and to the organizers of the symposium at OADI for inviting and including me here. As she mentioned, my colleague, Dr. Eric Heinze, is unable to attend by reason of illness, and so he asked me yesterday afternoon to sit in for him, and so I'll be trying to do my best with that today. I'm going to be assisted in that by a fantastic panel, again, on the security implications of emerging technologies. We're going to expand the discussion, having talked about real-world current problems in unmanned aerial systems and in climate change and in defense procurement that we've heard a lot about, to talking now about more things that are over the horizon, just a little bit. Quantum, 3D and additive manufacturing, cybersecurity issues currently, but also on the radar, artificial intelligence, and all kinds of other technologies that people in this room will be well versed in, but that present in some ways slightly different challenges than more established, mature technologies. So please join me in welcoming to the stage a fantastic panel. Our first panelist is Lieutenant General Carl Schaefer of the United States Air Force, Dr. Mohammad Khaleel of Oak Ridge National Labs, and Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Stephen Morani. So, gentlemen, I'll be sticking to the questions that Dr. Heinze sort of prepared and talked to all of you about. But hopefully, we'll be able to sort of expand beyond that and get the audience involved as well. Starting with General Schaefer, the recent White House National Security Strategy of the Biden administration indicates that, quote, the most impactful public investments are the ones we make in our people. In light of this, what critical skills does the Department of Defense require to outpace global strategic competitors, specifically as they relate to emerging technologies? What is DoD doing to recruit, manage, and retain individuals with these critical skills? And in your view, how successful have these efforts been?
That's just an easy question right out of the gate. Well, first of all, it's such an honor to be in the room, and huge congratulations to the University of Oklahoma for having us here and having the vision to connect with DoD. So I just think it's awesome. So I do want to just start out with my first assignment was at Vance Air Force Base as an instructor pilot, and we rolled over. We drove in from Colorado. My wife and I are from Colorado, and we're flipping through the stations, and our choices at that time were country music, country music, country music, soybean futures, oil futures, country music, and my wife's like, where are you taking me? And so we ended up at Vance, and I will tell you that we fell in love with Oklahoma. So my daughter is an Oklahoman, and our best assignment here, I actually left Oklahoma to go remote to Korea for a year away from my family, and my family had a choice to go back and stay with mom and dad like many do, but she chose to stay in Oklahoma because of the friendships and the people and the support that she got from the local community. So just huge thank you to this community. That she's gone off, she's graduated from University of Florida. My middle son did as well, and my youngest is at Auburn, so we welcome OU to the SEC. We're waiting for you. And I do just want to say we have a strong connection with Oklahoma. So with that, to the question, again, this is a team sport. National security is a team sport. I know everyone here in this room realizes that, and that's why we're all here. But I will tell you that the rest of America doesn't necessarily understand that the way you all do. And so just to sum up who do we need, and I'll go into kind of why we need, but to sum up who we need in the DoD, we need critical thinkers, we need folks that are digitally literate, and we need innovators. And that's the culture, within the Air Force, and I can speak for the Air Force, that we are trying to recruit and attract and retain into the Air Force. So I'll start kind of big picture. National security strategy says our pacing challenge is the PRC. Right? And every day our Secretary of the Air Force gets up in his top 3 priorities from Secretary Kendall: China, China, and China. And so based on that, over this past year, he brought together a team of people to come up with 7 operational imperatives that are going to drive the Air Force future design. And you may have heard of some of these. You just mentioned one, JADC2, Joint All-Domain Command and Control, partnered with Advanced Battle Management System. Next Generation Air Dominance family of systems. How do we take the next generation of capability manned and team that with autonomy to effective capability? How do we engage moving target at scale? I won't go through all 7 of them, but what he did I thought was brilliant. He pulled together an acquisition lead at a general officer or a senior executive level. He pulled in an operational lead at a general officer level, and he also pulled in industry to say, how do we close these gaps in the quickest way possible? And then those gaps and the solutions to those gaps helped inform our FY24 budget and beyond. And that's the path that we're on. And so with that comes now how do we get the right people back to making sure that we have an innovative culture that they can come work with, that we have critical thinking skills, and we have digital literacy. And so, within Air Force Materiel Command, and so for those of you who aren't familiar, my boss, General Richardson, we're headquartered in Dayton, and we have 6 centers. Think of them as product centers underneath. About 90,000 people in the command. 70,000 of those are civilians, about 20,000 military. And we basically do the life cycle management for develop. So really, AFMC, Air Force Materiel Command, is the engine for the rest of the Air Force. We do all the S&T through Air Force Research Lab. We do all the weapon systems development through Life Cycle Management Center, and then 2 legs of the triad with the Nuclear Weapons Center. So those 2 centers are the ones that are procuring and developing and creating capability for the warfighter. It's sustained by our Sustainment Center. We have our General Hawkins and our other Sustainment Center leadership here in the room, headquartered here in Tinker. And we have the Test Center that tests everything that we're producing. And then we also have the Installation Mission Support Center, which is the backbone of the infrastructure for our Air Force, working through all the money that goes into supporting our airmen and our families, through our military bases. And so that's the range of folks that we need. Everybody from turning wrenches, at Tinker, all the way through the PhDs that we need in the lab. And so we do have some great authorities that we've been given. So we've been given the direct hiring authority, so we can give on-the-spot job offers, which has helped. We have expediting hiring authorities. Over the last couple of years, we've narrowed down our 4-month hiring timeline to about less than 60 days. That's still not good enough. We're trying to drive to under 30 days to make that barrier of entry very quick into government service. And then as far as the Air Force Recruiting Service, which generally focuses on how do we get young folks out of the United States into the military, they're also now tuned to, hey, if you can't serve for whatever reason, maybe that tattoo is in the wrong place, or maybe you have a medical issue that doesn't allow you to be on active duty, they're tuned to steer that over to civil service so that we can recruit, attract, and retain. So I would just say there are a number of efforts. We have an ability right now to do highly qualified experts, which is hiring somebody from 3 or 5 years, that's a PhD potentially, or somebody who's an expert in industry to come in and best advise us when you think about AI or data science. So we have a number of opportunities. That really, the question is, are we going to use them all, and are we going to continue to accelerate, change, or lose, which is what our chief really wants us to do.
Thank you, General. Dr. Khaleel, we'll start off by asking you just to take a couple of minutes to describe your position at Oak Ridge National Labs and the scope of your responsibilities, and then we'll come to the first question, and then we'll do the same with Mr. Morani.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mo Khaleel. I'm the Associate Director of Oak Ridge National Lab. Oak Ridge National Lab is the largest science lab in the country. It's about $2.7 billion of research. The genesis and the heritage of Oak Ridge goes back to the Manhattan Project. Actually, the first continuously run reactor in the US was the graphite reactor at Oak Ridge. You may think of the national labs in the Department of Energy just working on energy. I can tell you in 1946, actually August 1946, we shipped isotopes to a clinic in Minnesota. Right? Today, we continue to ship medical isotopes, to various clinics in the country. So the national labs play a big role in the health of the citizens and so on. We have a nuclear reactor at Oak Ridge. We have spallation neutron source. You can think about a big microscope. You can image materials. You can image them in operando, in situ. We have the world's fastest computer today in the open, called Frontier. So there's a lot of first of a kind at the national lab. In national security, we're stewarding US capabilities to enrich uranium, high enrichment uranium, HALO, and other things. We have a lot of capabilities in nuclear nonproliferation. We work with the Department of Defense on some of these things. Again, cybersecurity is very important to us. Human security, especially in the geointelligence area, and a lot of other intelligence capabilities that actually we utilize science and translate science to real solutions, for the intel community.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that sort of brief introduction to the lab. The first question we have for you is about computing and about the sort of potential for a major change in the sort of paradigm of computing, moving from digital potentially to quantum computing. And the question is specifically, where do you see quantum computing making an impact in national security applications, and what challenges do you see that its adoption may create?
So first, I'll start with the history, right? If you look at the chip in your cell phone, it's maybe an ARM chip. If you go back maybe 15 years, that was actually the power of a supercomputer. The internet was invented in the 80s. It moved fast in the 90s. A lot of us enjoyed the internet. The whole business of doubling, transistors on a chip, took us to where we are today, right? But actually, what we call Moore's law is dead, right? So now we can actually utilize what we call the quantum states, and by doing so, we can do calculations way faster than we ever done with our big computers. So quantum actually is going to be a big game changer, right? And in computing, in communication, and in quantum sensing. And so what's tricky and important for us is our ability to adopt quantum, computing, quantum communication, and it's really not okay to be number two. You see, I think we need to go back to be able to invent and innovate faster than the competition can copy. So in quantum, for example, quantum computing, you can use it for cases where you have to have many variables, you have to optimize very big problems. Some of these problems on traditional computers may take years to do, and on a quantum computer, a few minutes. Just imagine the kind of advantage you would get. So one area I want to talk about is actually quantum communication. Quantum communication can actually enable us to have resilient space, where it's harder for the adversaries, to interfere with these devices. Likewise in cybersecurity. So again, one experiment we did at Oak Ridge, we've actually encrypted, we have a quantum key encryption for part of an electrical grid between us and Chattanooga. Chattanooga is an hour and a half. When you do quantum encryption, it's pretty difficult to interfere with that. And if somebody did, it's fairly easy to detect that change in the polarization of the light. Unfortunately, you have to generate random numbers to do the quantum encryption. These random numbers are generated on the classical computers. So you have to learn a lot about that. But I truly believe A quantum is actually can give us, a quantum leap in things, and the Department of Defense should have an urgency to adopt it for many applications. As I said, I mentioned the space, but you can think about, in hypersonics, there's a lot of microelectronics. A lot of the microelectronics there, you got copper as the interconnect. You can actually put photonics right there, and you could localize an EMP, and if you have photonics, it will not do much at all. If you have copper, it will toast it. Okay, so I think we have huge opportunities, but we really need to have a sense of urgency and to work together on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Deputy Assistant Secretary Morani, thank you for your patience. We'll ask you to take a couple of minutes and describe the sort of nature and scope of your role in DoD, and then we'll have the first question for you.
Okay, so thank you. Yeah, and thank you for inviting me. I think I don't see Gene Kirkland in the room. Oh, there he is. So I probably work for about 5 or 6 people in the room here today, so just letting you know. It just tells you how old I am. But thank you again for the invitation. Honorable Lohman wasn't able to come, so he sent me in his stead, but I'm very excited that we got to follow Honorable Lord, who I also worked for a while. But so when she explained a bit about the OSD role, right? People go, what do you guys do? We are this small kind of corporate staff activity, right, on behalf of the secretary to oversee the department, to oversee the business units, the services. So recently, as in 2021, we reorganized. When I got to OSD, we were 2 large assistant secretary components mashed together after we broke up what was called AT&L. Acquisition, technology, and logistics. It was a very bad decision that was made for reasons that probably weren't about efficiency. So we break this thing up, we called AT&L, into R&E and Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. And then we mashed together 2 components at a lower level and made it so big that all we could focus on was installations, environment, and energy. So for a few years, we lost the focus on sustainment, or what we called sustainment. We used to call it logistics and material readiness. It's the same functions, but it's under a new name. So what do? So we care about moving stuff, storing stuff, fixing stuff, right? And that's what we do in sustainment. So when we actually stood up an ASD for industrial policy and an ASD for installations, environment, and energy, what was ASD sustainment became LNMR again, under a different name. So now I get to focus on fixing stuff, moving stuff, storing stuff, and we've been doing that for the past 2 years with most recently now a political appointee. So why is that important? Well, it's important because Honorable Lord said it, 70% of the cost of a weapon system over its life cycle is in sustainment. Yet we don't behave that way. We focus on the acquisition cycle up front, rightly so, but we're biased towards cost, schedule, and performance, and we end up trading things off. So one of our goals is to ensure that sustainment is designed in up front and that we do not make those trades. Because once you start bending metal, and you're at what we would say is milestone B, going into that hard design and then into production, you get the sustainment that you paid for and that you paid attention to up front. So that is one of our key focus areas, and ensuring that we put our attention in design, and this is where innovation comes in. I want to innovate in the design. I need to innovate when a system's in the field, but think about things like material science, right? There's probably a few chemistry majors or chemical engineers or material scientists in the room here. I want you to make metal that doesn't rust, okay? Can you do that for me? Because $20 billion a year goes towards, corrective, preventative, or inspection of things that are rusting. So if you could fix that problem, you would be a hero. The next big problem is propulsion. That's another area, $9 billion a year. So if you can make something that helps me prevent those blades from changing shape over time, right? Because of corrosion, again, and erosion, and I'm talking compressor blades, primarily fan blades, you would be a hero. And you would save a lot of inspection and repair and overhaul. And then the third major area that we pay attention to is electronics maintenance. We talked about that briefly. So we have an agency called the Defense Microelectronics Agency. Anybody hear of them? They work for ASDS. Okay, I got one in the room. How come you don't know about these guys? Well, partly because we've not done a good job of making sure you know about them. But they are punching way, way above their weight class out in Sacramento, California at what was McClellan Air Force Base, at solving obsolescence problems for fielded weapon systems and ensuring that designing in up front a microcircuit design that we could modernize over time. So I know that was a lot. Those are the things we're focused on. My boss would be angry with me if I didn't talk about data-informed sustainment. And we talked a little bit about that, about having those digital competencies. I'd be very happy if people could do statistics, by the way, and they could take the metrics that we have and understand what they mean when they go up or down. But we're using data in a way that we never have before, and it's enabling things such as what we call condition-based maintenance plus, right? Because now we have data environments and we have machine learning and analytic tools that allow us to apply that with the competencies that we have in the government, partnering with industry to understand how things are failing, right? And interpret that data, look for trends, take the sensor data and make better decisions. The other area I'll talk about, and then I'll move on to the question because we're burning time here, is we talked about the DIB. Ms. Lord mentioned the DIB. When I came back to the Pentagon, I'm like, DIB, 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 what's this DIB thing, right? Defense Industrial Base. But it was in the context of our private sector, right? Well, we have an entire organic industrial base that is part of that ecosystem of what we call our Defense Industrial Base. And it's a partnership, right? The health of both is necessary to ensure that we can do this sustainment over the life cycle of our systems because we keep them a long time. It's not an iPhone, right, where you're turning it over every few years. We buy them for a lifespan and then we extend that lifespan. And so we have to have the competencies, the equipment, and the facilities in order to do that. So that's another area that we as industry, academia, and the government need to work together to maintain the health.
Thank you. And
Okay.
like all the best panelists, you've anticipated the first question. I think that was a really nice introduction to some of the sort of key foci for sustainment technologies that DoD is pursuing and focused on. What I want you to do in the first question then as a sort of slightly amended version is connect that to these emerging technologies. And maybe through that really interesting statement you made that you get the sustainment that you pay for in advance, right? So as we think about over the horizon technologies then, how do we tie that to paying for the right sustainment up front?
Okay. Wow, no softballs here. So that's an interesting question that I think all of you probably have wrestled with and probably have some scar tissue in the room here and could probably answer that as well, if not better than me, right? How do we get the right thing? So you have this great idea, right? And we have these different processes. Honorable Lord mentioned, small business innovation and research, right? That's one of these ways that you have an idea that could improve or mitigate corrosion, for example, or improve how we, troubleshoot electronics maintenance, right? You have this great idea, but how do you get it into the system's design up front? Or how do you get it into the defense industrial base, the part of the industrial base that is sustaining fielded systems, right? So I'll give you the recipe for that. Well, no, I won't, because if I had the recipe, I'd be doing it right now. But I'll try to help you connect some of the things you need to do, and it's not the technology. The technology, you've heard this, the hard stuff's easy, the soft stuff's hard. Have you heard that? Okay, so the soft stuff is the people part, right? You've got the technology figured out. How do I get it into the department is your challenge. Through a SIBR that only gives you money for 1 year, or maybe 2 years, and then you run out of money, and then you can't do anything with. We talked about the PBE process, and And Honorable Lord is looking for ways to come up with flexibility in our planning, programming, and POMing cycle that we can keep those programs, those initiatives online. But the thing you need to do is, and this is important, you have to start with the end in mind. You have to know how the user is going to apply your technology. And when I say the user, not just the Department of Defense user, the commercial users as well, right? Because oftentimes, to keep it relevant, it gets fielded in the commercial sector and not the Department of Defense. So you need to know who your stakeholder community is. And before you start taking pen to paper and writing that SIBR, you need to understand who needs to be aware of this. You need to talk to them and make sure they understand it, how you're going to apply it once you are ready to scale it. Because somebody's going to have to be trained on it, right? Somebody's going to have to incorporate that into their repair process or their manufacturing process. If you haven't thought through those things first, then your ability to succeed is limited. And then you have to find out who is that frozen middle that Honorable Lord talked about. Because there's a frozen middle in every organization. And those are the status quo people. Those are the people who don't want to change, right? Because they like their thing, you know? We wouldn't have the bread slicer if it wasn't for Wonder Bread, because everybody liked their knife. But you know, you have to have someone with vision to take a new idea and put it into play. But you have to be able to communicate to those people who still like their knife why this is going to make their life easier. It's not just a business case, but it's improved the quality of their life. And then you got to get it into the hands of those end users. And if they love your idea, then from the bottom up, they're going to push it to their leadership. So it's both top down, bottom up in order to make your technology successful. So hopefully that filled in one or two blanks and maybe gives you a different approach. Over.
Thank you. General, I was delighted to learn last night that under your purview are a lot of the Air Force research labs and other entities like that. And so I want to ask you to speak, especially because we're here at a public university that's trying its best to connect with the defense industrial base, with the Department of Defense, with the uniformed branches. How can the Department of the Air Force better connect their own science and technology efforts to their operational needs to stay ahead of adversaries and meet emergent requirements? But also, I'll invite you to sort of talk about how those efforts and those research and development efforts can be better connected to universities like the University of Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's great. Another great question. It's Air Force Research Lab's job, right, to stay connected to the operator and make sure they're solving operational problems and to really help work getting from that innovative idea that Mr. Morani is talking about to across the Valley of Death to implementation, to get that into the Life Cycle Management Center or the Nuclear Weapons Center and actually create combat capability. And so Major General Heather Pringle leads our Air Force Research Lab, and under her leadership, she developed, on behalf of the Secretary and actually some great advice from Dr. Lewis at the time, an S&T 2030 strategy. And that was really to align the lab investments with the operational capabilities that we need. And so we have an S&T 2030 strategy that's driving investments. And then they created a conference where they come together. It's called WarTech, Warriors and Technologists, where they get together at an operational level, those operational experts with the scientists to go, here are the operational problems that we need to solve. And scientists, what can we bring to bear? And then that actually prioritizes investment for AFRL. And then finally, like I mentioned, the Secretary's 7 operational imperatives. He has had now a number of engagements with Air Force Research Lab, based on his background, to really make sure that all those funding priorities within the lab are going after some of these operational capabilities. So back to your connection to universities. So we have a number of university partnerships, through AFRL funds, university partnerships with OU and with OSU and with Tulsa. And back to the recruiting and retaining piece of this, it's really, we're never going to be able to match industry as far as paying for some of this talent. But we can provide something that is very inspirational, right? Service to your nation. And so when we get exposure in these partnerships with universities, especially OU, at an impressionable age, that they can solve, no kidding, national security problems and get funding to do that and actually see something to fruition, that's very powerful and very attractive for our young folks to come in and serve, either as a civil service or in the military. So another piece of this is how do we best move people, in and out of active duty to reserves or guard to industry back? How do we better do this? The Space Force is exploring this right now. One of General Raymond's initiatives to go, how can we better have folks take a time out, go work for industry for 3 or 4 years, and then bring them back either on active duty or into civil service without a break in service and continue leveraging that expertise back and forth. And universities can help us out with that as well, with the faculty that have the opportunity to do that, or the folks that are in the universities to come and support us. So a lot of great efforts going on. The Office of Scientific Research, which many of the universities are familiar with, is the one who hands out the grants underneath AFRL for these university partnerships.
Excellent, thank you. Dr. Khaleel, I want to ask you to very briefly comment on sort of Oak Ridge's partnerships with universities and any advice you have for university faculty seeking to sort of build that kind of partnership. But I also want to ask you to speak about the importance of artificial intelligence and the efforts to improve AI to make it better, smarter, faster, and the challenges and opportunities you see for science and technology perspectives and technologists getting involved for realizing those goals with the government.
Okay. So I think I'll start with the AI. One of the big issues with AI is you need lots of data. AI needs a training, and you need to make sure the data actually has the right pedigree, ontologies, and all of that. And I think the Department of Defense, like Steve was talking about data, there's a lot of data in the Department of Defense. But I want to also differentiate between AI that, say, Google or others use versus AI for security. AI for security demands different things. And one of the big things is resiliency. You need resilient AI where, you understand it, it's explainable, etc., right? The other thing is, we need to really have a good understanding of adversarial AI. What are the adversaries they're doing in the space, and how they're countering our stuff, and we need also to look at the counter for that. So these are really important open questions in AI that we need to work on. A lot of times, when we talk about resiliency and so on, somebody can tamper in your data, and you can build an AI model based on data that may not be all accurate. They could steal your model and do something else with it, and that goes to the adversarial aspects. Now, AI in the defense, you can use it for autonomy, right? Like at Oak Ridge National Lab, for example, I'm going to give a science example. Synthesizing materials and discovering materials takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, right? So to accelerate the discovery of materials, we actually use automation and AI such that we can actually figure out how we're going to cook these materials, how we're going to deal with processing them and things like that. And we do it also on the characterization side of things. You need, AI for autonomous, everything, right? And the next future wars, I don't think we're going to have man or woman, fighting them. We're going to have machines, fighting these things. So that's an example. The other is, I think somebody earlier talked about satellites and the importance of satellites. Again, you need AI to be able to look at imagery and define, certain things in these images. But I think the application of AI goes across everything, from healthcare all the way, to finance. At Oak Ridge National Lab, we house the Million Vets data, genomics data, and medical data. And there's a lot of discoveries that actually you do through AI for that. Now, the question about the universities, Oak Ridge is really blessed by having core universities attached to it. And the universities work on fundamental problems, and we really need that. I really believe our ecosystem for innovation needs to be tweaked, right? We actually, we operate in clusters. We really need to operate in an integrated mode. The same also when we look at government. Here is an entity is doing something, say Department of Energy. Like today, when the panelists in the climate area were talking about carbon capture or hydrogen, etc., the Department of Energy and its 17 national labs work on a lot of these problems. But they don't need to. They need to be integrated, okay, with the Department of Defense, other agencies. That's really, really important. I think for us, working with the university here is really important. We've known Tomas for a long time, and I really believe when I went to the radar lab, the pedigree and the genetics of the people, the DNA of the people, is really trying to move things from science to real solutions. And I think that's really an important thing. The national labs can enrich the universities in this regard, and they can enrich us when it comes to fundamental aspects. Now, there is a lot of other ways you can work together. In the US, we don't do enough joint appointments between universities and labs. We don't do enough exchange. People actually are the best way to move information from one side to the other. I think with Tomas, that's something we're talking about, joint faculty and so on. Some new degrees, when you look at emerging technologies, take a quantum. Look in the US and ask how many universities have courses in quantum. Very few, right? Again, take advanced manufacturing, right? Cyber. I think Tulsa is one of the great schools in cybersecurity, right? Cyber physical security. Right, but there's very few, okay, and so you need that. You need to kind of modernize the curricula and things of that nature. But I think having joint facilities, I think a lot of times we're not thinking about our adversaries and the competition enough, okay, and I think we tend to think things will remain the same. I don't think things are remaining the same. Look, okay, if you, years ago, you look at China, we used to say, the Chinese, copy the work we're doing and things like that. And we used to use AI to create the clusters of IP and things like this. And they publish a lot. Many folks, were here. They absorbed the culture of innovation of the United States. They're back in China. So China is no longer copying. They're innovating. And we need to innovate much faster. To innovate much faster, we all need to come together. And we need to come together in a new model where people actually have, the flexibility to flow and to work together to address these big challenges.
Thank you. Just mindful of time, letting our audience know that we're going to take one more brief question to Mr. Morani, and then we'll get the audience Q&A beginning. Mr. Morani, I just want to sort of ask you to talk very briefly about the sort of global nature of key military supply chains and how that reality affects the necessity of global coalition building as part of a broader national security strategy. Again, just sort of really very quickly.
Okay,
yeah.
so yeah, briefly. So we are this global integrated supply chain. We as a nation, as a strategy to try to create these interdependencies between nations in our thoughtful, idealistic way, because we are a country of ideals, thought that would bring us together and avoid conflict, right? So integrated to the point that we can't do things without an external partner supply chain, right? Whether that's a ally or an adversary in most cases. So the good news is, although we know their stuff's in our stuff, our stuff's in their stuff, right? They need us as much as we need them. But this global integration is causing us some serious challenges. If you read the newspapers recently, not that F-35 is not in the paper, but it was just most recently in the paper about magnets, right? And this gets back into being able to see into our supply chains and understand, Ms. Lord's point about supply chain risk on multi-levels, to the point about AI and the ability to have these tools to do that and build these data environments. So all this works together to ensure that we have resilient supply chains. And I know you said be brief, so I won't go into the whole resiliency because that conversation could take us the rest of the day. But that resiliency requires that we have these alternatives, right? And that we have a robust supply chain. And we're not going to do that without partnership, right? Partnership with government, industry, and academia. We really have to not be afraid of our competition with one another as defense industry companies, because we need to be resilient. You need more than one provider, right? But maybe this model needs to change with how we share information and how we think a little bit more strategic about our supply chains and not be afraid of that competition within our defense industrial base, because that competition makes us stronger if you think about it. Anybody who's an athlete in this room, you know, if I was going to go to the gym, I would want to work out with General Hawkins, right? He would be my workout partner. Why? Because he's way bigger than me, way stronger than me. I know that if I'm going to work out with him, I'm going to get stronger. So it's the same thing with competition. It makes us stronger. I'll end on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's turn to our audience and hopefully get at least a couple of questions in. Yes, in the second row. Please.
This one's for the doctor, though, Mr. Morani, you could possibly answer this too. You hit AI about 50 times in the speech, all of you did. And in the sustainment world, it's pretty difficult for us to be able to project out what we think are going to be the issues that we see in the future. And we think predictive analysis is going to be very important. Feeds right into this idea of CBM+. How far out do you think today we could project, if we were given enough information, the issues that might be a problem with sustainment of an asset? So in other words, we'd look out maybe 2-3 years, we can have a fairly good idea of 60%, but we'd like to be able to look out 10 years with 80% effectiveness. I know you'd run the horses with that, but that's okay. Over.
So first of all, thank you. So I think, you know, when it comes to AI, you know, the accuracy of the AI depends on the data that one has and the training you do. There is ways you can quantify the uncertainty in these AI models, and that actually helps you in ensuring that you're going to be able to project. If you also, your AI models are explainable, you can explain why, this and that, then, you know, that also enables you to be a lot more predictive. I believe the technologies are here, but we need to, you know, have real world examples to examine, you know, these set of models.
If I may just add 2 things to that. So I absolutely agree with that. I think supply chain operations, if we are going to get better at that, we have to apply these tools. But it's going to require us back to being able to share with one another, right? You know, if I was asked what's the leading constraint, it's ability to share data, right? Everybody wants, because data is knowledge, data is power. And when we don't share it, we limit the visibility, right? So we have to get over that. Your point about CBM Plus and supply chain, I mean, that's where the real value is going to be. Understanding the consumption of life on different components and then using that to make your supply chain more resilient.
General Schaefer, I'm quite familiar with the idea that in science and in applications you have levels. So basic research, 0, 1, 2, and then. But it did almost sound like to me that at Wright-Patterson, you don't have this valley of death that we still have from research to applications. And at the National Weather Center, we continue to work on this problem with our NOAA colleagues, but there always seems to be this valley of death from research to applications. Have you solved that problem?
Short answer, no.
No. Good.
And I'm willing to take all ideas. Please help us. No, I will tell you, one thing that we did do in AFRL, we created what's called Vanguard programs. And the intent of the Vanguard program was to take a relatively mature technology, pair that with an acquisition lead, and assign a lead MAGCOM to be responsible for operationalizing this capability that we know we need as a warfighting capability to accelerate it across the Valley of Death. One of those programs was Skyborg, which is our autonomy program, which is being accelerated into the NGAD program I mentioned. So that was one Vanguard. The next Vanguard was Golden Horde, which was collaborative weapons. So we matured collaborative weapons technology, and now that is being ported into weapons technology down at Eglin in our weapons development. We did NTS-3, which is a non-GPS global positioning technology that is about to go on orbit. So we took those Vanguard. The final Vanguard is rocket cargo. So we're looking with the other launch services to be able to go, hey, can we shoot something on one of these launch platforms anywhere in the world, within an hour? So those are the things that we're trying to do to accelerate across the Valley of Death. And there's been modicum of success with each one of those that we could talk through. But that has been one way that we've gotten about it. And then that took really, the secretary and the chief and everybody to buy in to go, we are going to invest in these, and then put money against them in future years.
We need to know more about.
Yeah, no, definitely. Absolutely. So I want to go back to AI I know we talk a lot about AI, but I want to go back to AI as a model for technology adoption. But I want to talk about it not in the context of sustainment, but in the context of battlefield management. Yes. Okay, because I think this is coming and it's really important, and the adversary is moving in this direction. What are your thoughts? At what point does large artificial intelligence models, at what point do they become trustworthy enough that we will implement them in the battlefield, for example, in the context of directed energy weapons, and using that, in some battlefield scenario? Where do you think, General, that the adoption will happen? That translation from the development to the actual adoption in the battlefield, what do you think needs to happen for AI to really have an impact in how we think about the battlefield?
Another great question, Tomas. So first of all, I think this is Schaefer opinion. The country that is able to move data, decision quality data, as faster than the other country to achieve effect, whether that's a kinetic effect or non-kinetic effect, that country's going to win. So that's the race that we're in. It's a race about data and data management. How do we control that data, and how do we trust those data, that we're moving around? So one thing, we did stand up a partnership with MIT. The Air Force did for an AI accelerator with MIT. We're partnered with MIT on a lot of this, the ethics of AI and adoption of AI. I think from an operational perspective, the first adoption is going to be, how is this unmanned teaming going to work, and the trust. And I wouldn't call that AI right off the bat, right? It's probably some good algorithms and some machine learning that's going on, and probably not true AI yet. There's still a long ways to go to be able to trust that from an AI perspective. And then the other thing that we're really working within the command is, how do we test that? So from an Air Force Test Center perspective, how do you put the right wrappers around AI to be able to test that, to be able to prove to decision makers that when we are going to press the button to send something to make a decision and learn and actually execute, that there's confidence in it. So we're working through that right now. The test center is working through that. So again, open to any ideas.
If I may add what?
Sorry, we have a great data science institute at the University.
So if I may add a little something there. So, at Oak Ridge National Lab, we're working with one of the intelligence agencies on trying actually, like in the Ukraine, to look at, cities and see what got damaged and things like that. And again, to be able to do that in a quick time frame, we have a ground satellite station, download the stuff, and you got a big supercomputer trying to crunch the numbers, fairly quickly. At the same time, the questions about, back in the field, what are the assets, the status of the assets? That's a lot trickier question, to try and see what's damaged, what's not damaged, and so on. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, in the space.
Well, thank you for joining us, gentlemen, and please join me in giving a real thank you and welcome again to our panelists for this session.
Dr. Raymond and panelists, thank you so much for that discussion. We are ready for our last break of the day. We'll make it a relatively quick one. And so if you could be back in your seats in about 10 minutes, that'd be great. Thank you.